Hi, guys. Welcome to an impromptu live stream. It's been all week since I've uploaded some content other than an interview that I did a while back. And I'm traveling in the Caribbean, as most of you know, just trying to get to St. Barts to get a little bit of freedom. And it's a lot harder than you would imagine. And I can go into it if you guys want me to. But I thought that I'd throw up some content. It's a Thursday night. Usually we do a whiteboard video, but don't have a whiteboard here, don't have the option to do that video. So I thought I'd just hop on for a quick live stream Q&A to answer some questions. Normally I'd be doing a live stream in the Rebel Capitalist Pro Forum tonight with Chris McIntosh, but in the part of the island where I'm in the Virgin Islands, the internet is down. So I have to do this via my cell phone. So I don't even know if it works or if you guys can hear me or if there's an audio lag or who knows. We'll just keep going, try to have some fun with it and go over some recent topics that I've been thinking through and try to answer some of your questions. Oh, good. Porcupine73 says it's working fine. Cilius, it's working great. Working, you're all good. Okay, very cool. Awesome. So a couple things that I've been thinking about. I don't know if any of you listened to the most recent version or the most recent episode of Macro Voices. That came out tonight. Make sure you check that out. That's with my partner, Lynn Alden. She is fantastic, as you guys know. And of course, the host of the show is my good buddy, Eric Townsend. It's probably one of the best podcasts, if not the best macro podcast out there. I think it's probably better than mine, but it's just for a different group of people. It's obviously Eric and I have different styles, but it's definitely some amazing content. But what was startling, to say the least, the first part of the episode where Eric talks to Patrick and they go over what's happening in the market and recent updates. Eric, and he was the first person to talk about what's going on with the cerveza sickness. This was way back in January. And so he really saw this coming from a mile away, pretty much called it. And he's really on top of kind of where we are with the facts, quote unquote, in the science or lack thereof. And he was talking today about a few reports that have come out that are not peer reviewed, and take it for what it's worth, but they're coming out, whether you believe it or not, where they're saying that people might not have antibodies, even if you get the cerveza sickness, no big deal, whatever, you get over it. And whether you think it's just the flu or not, it doesn't really matter for what I'm talking about. But you got these antibodies, but they're saying potentially that they only stay in the system for 8 weeks or so, and then you're susceptible to kind of like the cold. And what Eric was talking about, this isn't his idea, Eric's extremely libertarian, I know Eric personally, but some of the suggestions from people in let's call it the medical community, is that you could come up with some sort of chip that you insert into your skin that would release this vaccine, call it once every 2 months or so. And whenever people start talking about inserting a chip, and obviously this wasn't Eric's idea, but he was just talking about what these scientists, quote unquote, or doctors are talking about. But whenever I see what's going on with the Fed, the government, and how we're moving quickly, I think, into a digital currency and a ban on cash, and you start talking about implanting chips into people's skin, that's where I start to, well, it's not where I start, it's where I continue to really start to ponder, okay, what are we doing here? Like what's our end game for this? And I'm not throwing out any conspiracy theory or anything like that. You can believe in the cerveza sickness, you can not. But again, it doesn't really matter if it's real or not. If people and the governments are imposing these draconian measures, you could see a potential outcome where you got to make a decision as an American. Do you want to get this chip in your skin for the rest of your life, or do you want to be allowed to travel? Do you want to get this chip, or do you want to be allowed to start a business? Because obviously, if you're not willing to do something as simple as putting a chip in your skin, obviously this isn't me talking, this is them, then you're not fit to run a business because you don't care about people's health. Where do they draw the line? So let's say you can't travel. Let's say you can't start a business. Let's say you can't buy and sell things on eBay or the internet, or you can't have people over to your house because you haven't received this chip and it's for the benefit of the greater good. And we hear that all the time. And oh, don't worry, this is for your safety. This is for your safety. You know, whenever the government starts talking about something that they're doing for quote unquote your safety, that's when we really need to be alarmed, in my opinion. And it's and I'm not saying that any of this is playing out or any of that, and I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not even saying that there's a probability. I'm just, like with everything I do, I try to think through, okay, this is an interesting thought experiment, right? Like, what do you do in that situation if it were to occur? Do you choose the chip, or do you choose to the chip and the ability to not really carry on normally, but for as normal as possible, to where you can actually travel, you can start a business? Or do you say, I'm not getting a chip, but then what do? You just hunker down and live the rest of your life within 5 square miles of where you currently live? How do you get a job? How do you start a business? How do you support yourself? How do you support your family? These are difficult questions. And again, I'm not saying that this is happening. I'm not saying be prepared. I'm thinking this through in my head as to, if this sci-fi movie were to play out, what would you do? I mean, you go back to the end of 2019. I mean, what were we talking about? We were all talking about the repo market, right? We were talking about the repo spike and the Fed coming in and committing to doing all these hundreds of billions of dollars in repo, and that this was just madness, which it absolutely was. But now look where we are. I'm sitting here trying to get to an island that's literally 100 miles from where I am. And as an American citizen, it's almost impossible. It's almost impossible. And if you would have told me this 6 months ago, I would have told you that you're crazy, that's never, ever going to happen. And I'm talking about charter flights. I'm talking about chartering a boat. I'm talking about someone, excuse me, with, I don't have unlimited resources, but I have enough resources to charter a jet if I want to go to an island that's 100 miles away. And that's a no-go. You can't do that. In every single area around me, another country requires that you have a negative COVID test to get in the country, but it has to be taken within 72 hours. But the problem is everywhere in the United States where you can get one of these tests, or at least in Florida where I was, you can't get the results back for at least 5 days. So effectively, it puts a Berlin Wall around the United States to where you can't leave. And that's not a conspiracy theory. That's conspiracy fact, because I've been living it over the last week. And even in Puerto Rico now, they're requiring you to have a negative COVID test that's no more than 3 days old. And then if you don't have one and you land, then you have to self-quarantine for 14 days. There's no option. And then for a lot of places like St. Barts, you can't even get on the plane unless you have a COVID test. But here's what's crazy, is not only can you not get the COVID test for 5 days, but even if you could get it within the 72 hours, you really have to get it within 48 hours, because the airline has to submit that to the local government 24 hours in advance. So how do you get a COVID test, the results back within 48 hours of getting the test? And if you can't, you're grounded. You're not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere on a boat. You're not going anywhere on a plane. And that's not something that could happen in the future. That's something that is happening right now as we speak. I'm living it. I've been dealing with it for the last week of my life. And so my point is, I'm not saying any of this crazy stuff will happen, but I am saying that 6 months ago, we would have thought that the reality we're all living in right now was completely impossible, and only the stuff of Alex Jones and tinfoil hatters and stuff like that. So it's just I'm thinking it through just as a thought experiment, like I always do, and I don't have any answers. I was just throwing it out there. So let's get to the main part of why we're here, and that's to answer some questions and hopefully give you guys some good information. So instead of hearing me rant about all the issues of trying to travel throughout the Caribbean. All right, so to come back to America. No. Listen, I've been in Medellin, as most of you guys know, and they've been under lockdown. So I've had the chance to experience lockdown in another country and in the United States in Fort Lauderdale. And I would way rather be in Medellin with their type of lockdown. That was a sci-fi movie, it just being downtown Fort Lauderdale. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, I walked out of my hotel, which requires you to wear a mask, but I was just, I was just kind of pulling it up. I didn't have the thing over my nose yet. Keep in mind, I'm not within 20 feet of another person. Just and walking out of a hotel into the outdoors. And I've got a guy just screaming at me, yelling at me, calling me all these names because I'm walking out of the hotel without my mask completely up. Like, what? Like what are you talking about? It's not like he was right in my face. The guy's 20 feet away from me. I mean, everything is so politicized in the United States that now people are oh, you're not wearing a mask all the way up to your nose. Oh, well, you must be on the alt-right. You must be one of those alt-right people that's a fascist or whatever. And then same thing with the people on the right, oh, you're wearing a hazmat suit, or you're wearing one of those shields. You must be one of these crazy liberals. So I hate you just by the fact that you're wearing a mask or not wearing one. It's just a bizarre tension in the United States that I've never, ever seen before. And I don't think you can truly appreciate it unless you leave and then come back like a year later. So you see the difference. It's like looking at yourself in the mirror every day. You do it over and you don't really notice the changes. But if you didn't look at yourself in the mirror for 2 years, and all of a sudden you look in the mirror, you'd be like, oh my gosh, wow, I look substantially older. Boy, I can see the difference. And it's the same thing when you leave the States and come back. I tell you what, I'm very pessimistic on the next few years in the United States from the standpoint of the economy, the social unrest. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I sincerely do. I'm sorry. Okay, guys, let's get back to your questions here. That's what this is all about. So Ross, I'm not sure how to. Oh, okay, I can control the screen here with my finger. That's kind of cool. Ross asks, George, what factors do you look at to determine if a rental property is expensive or cheap? What to buy, but concerned prices will drop substantially? Well, you got to look at cash flow, Ross, because if you're buying cheap cash flow with cheap fixed rate debt, then it doesn't matter if the prices drop. You're still getting a good deal that you'd want to hang on to for the rest of your life and give to your kids. Just pretend that you're never going to sell it. That's what I'd do. And if you start with that framework, I think that you're going to be able to make a good decision. I think that real estate's in a bubble, but I do think the real estate market is so inefficient that if you know what you're doing, you can find a motivated seller and you could get something at a super cheap price even in today's market. But overall, if you just lump everything together, then I think prices are are way overpriced and definitely inflated. But I think that's where you got to start. You look at the cash flow there. Look for a 1% RV ratio. Okay, JD, can you explain an ESF, exchange stabilized fund? I don't know what that is. No, JD, I haven't done any homework on that. I understand the way an ETF works, and that Michael Burry's argument against ETFs. I've done a video on that I'd suggest, but I'm not sure how that's different from an ESF. Leonardo asks, why did you choose Colombia instead of Mexico or somewhere else in South America or Europe? Because oh shoot. Oh, there we go. There's a screen. Okay, sorry guys, I just lost the screen there. It was a macro decision, Leonardo. It was back in 2015 when oil dropped below 30. Might have just been intraday, but I knew oil was cheap, so I wanted to go long oil. I didn't know anything about oil, and I knew the Colombian peso was loosely tied to oil. So back then, I strictly knew real estate. So I thought if I bought real estate denominated in Colombian pesos in something that I actually know, that it would be a way to go long oil, while at the same time I'd be able to force that appreciation through a remodel, get cheap cash flow, and all the things that I always talk about. So I thought I could kind of get a double whammy on the pop in the currency because of oil, and then maybe forced appreciation. Then if I'm lucky, actual real appreciation. And for the majority, I've never sold those pesos that I brought in, so it's just kind of you're up on paper, down on paper. But for the majority of the time, I was up on paper. But what is a real gain is all the properties I've purchased and sold and made a substantial amount of money on the real estate side, even though the part of my strategy from a standpoint of going long oil worked for the majority of the time, but obviously right now it's not working out. The peso is lower than when I brought in most of my pesos, which was at 3,400 roughly, and we're at I don't know where we're at now, maybe 36, something like that. But that was my rationale for going to Colombia. And then I stayed because I love Colombia. And I can make a lot of money there. Okay. Oh, question. Here we are. Grand Finale asks, "Are you in St. Barts yet?" No. I'm trying to get there. Like I've been saying, it's like a military operation. Listen, the last business I had before I retired in 2012, I had over 100 employees, over 100 full time when you include the part timers and the full timers. And so you want to talk about logistical challenges. Not only that, we would hold conferences for a week at a time where I would have 5,000 people, 5,000 at a conference. So if anyone understands logistics, it's me. And I've never done anything logistically harder than just get myself from Fort Lauderdale to St. Barts. It's near impossible. And if you didn't have substantial resources, I don't know how you'd do it. I just don't know until if they change the law, or if they somehow get these tests done faster in the United States. I don't. You'd just be high and dry. I don't think you could do it. You'd have to have like a Jason Bourne type of skill set, and you'd have to have a substantial amount of money that you could throw at the problem just to get there. So I'm on my way, but I'm not there yet. I'm still waiting on the bureaucracy of what's going on here on the island. Got a test, just trying to get the results, and if I can't get the results in time to make the flight, and all the flights are being canceled, then I'm trying to fly private, but I can't do that if I don't get the test in time. Then if I've got to retake the test, and who knows if you're going to be able to retake the test, because now with these new laws that they just came out with last week, by the way. All the testing facilities are just jam packed. I mean, you can't get an appointment for weeks. So that's where I'm at with the St. Barts journey. Best question of the month: who owns the Fed? Watch my video. I just did a video on that. Everyone seemed to like that video, so check that out. Okay, I'm just scrolling through here, guys, see if we got any more questions. If you got one, just start the comment with question. Okay, Ed's got one. Ed Smith asks, George, you are the best. Okay, I like that question, Ed. Good one. Oh, shoot, it disappeared. When you say digital currency soon, how soon do you think? I think they're going to potentially move that direction when we get the next round of stimulus, Ed, because they had such a logistical challenge getting the stimulus checks. And we've all heard about the checks going to people who have been dead and all this stuff that you'd expect from a wildly inefficient government. So I think the next round, it's going to be something, or maybe not the next round, but sooner or later, I think it's going to be, hey, download this app on your phone. We'll call it the Fed app, or the Freedom Act app is what I've called it in a few of my videos. And then the Fed or the Treasury will just send you your UBI payment directly to your phone app. And that's how I think they start to phase out currency altogether. And I don't think it's going to be hard. I don't think they're going to have to twist people's arm. I think people are going to gravitate toward it naturally, just because they're, young people nowadays, they're not like, I think my generation was pretty much the last generation. I'm 47. It really valued that not only personal freedom, but the privacy, especially financial privacy. I just think back to when I was a young kid growing up in the 1970s and 80s, and my father was very old, relatively speaking, and he was old school. And my goodness, I can't even imagine my father going into a bank and like the teller, my dad saying, hey, I need 2,000 in cash, and the teller asking him what he needs it for. Or, oh, Mr. Gammon, what are you going to do with that cash? Like, as you guys know, every single time you take cash out of the bank nowadays, you just get drilled with 15 questions, or you got to fill out some form that goes straight to the government. Even when you do a wire, they're like, oh, what's the wire for? Oh, well, where'd you get the information for the wire? Like, what? Like, what are you going to say? Honestly, has anyone ever thought that through? Like, where did you get the information for this wire? Oh, I just got it from my local drug dealer. Like, who's going to say that? Like, are the bad guys going to just fess up and say, oh, you got me, bank, I cannot tell a lie. I cannot tell a lie. You got me. I got it from that arms dealer in Iran. Boy, shoot, what am I going to do? You're too smart for me. Who have they caught? Like, seriously, who has the bank caught by asking the person on the other end why they're doing the wire? Like, any bad guy on earth would just fess up because they asked the question. It's ridiculous when you just kind of think it through. But my point is, we're all accustomed to the banks being nosy. And my goodness, if you would have done that with my father, oh man, you want to see a volcano erupt. It would have been bad times for everyone in that bank, or whatever poor soul asked my father that question, what are you going to do with the money? Oh boy, that would have been a bad day for them, let me tell you that. But my point is just these generations, they don't see that. To them, it's just a convenience. Like, why would you want cash? Like, Why would you not want a chip in your arms? I mean, it just makes things so handy. I don't even have to have my driver's license now. All the cop has to do is just scan the chip in my arm. I mean, think about how fantastic that would be. You just go to Starbucks and you don't even have to pay. You don't even have to have your debit card. All you have to do is just scan your forearm right on the machine, and your Fed bucks from your app just digitally go from your chip in your arm to the teller. And think of how safe we would be, and think of how we wouldn't have to deal with terrorism and all the bad guys. They wouldn't get a chip. So, and if they did get a chip, if someone's trying to evade taxes, or, they always create these boogeymen that just really don't exist, then all you'd have to do is just turn off their chip, and then we could eliminate all the bad guys. This is how they sell it to you. It's always for your safety. So anyway, I'm just not very bullish on personal freedom in the United States moving forward, unfortunately. I mean, John Doe's asking the same type of question. What are your thoughts on places to go outside the U.S. as the State Department has stopped issuing passports? I have mine, so leaving is my next move. Well, John, again, I'm going to St. Barts. So why am I going to St. Barts? It's not so I can just go have a beer with Hugh Hendry, although I'll probably end up doing that. I've talked to Hugh about doing a couple interviews there. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy that content for the YouTube channel. I'm going to go out to Hugh's place. I think we might do a live interview, which will be very, very fun to say the least with Hugh, because he's obviously a brilliant guy, but he's a great character as well. So you guys stay tuned for that. But I'm going to St. Barts because it's the only place that I can find that's reasonably normal. You don't, the beaches are open, they don't have curfew, the restaurants are open, the cafes are open. You don't have to wear a mask. You can if you want to, which is the way I think it should be. I think you should be able to wear or not wear one based on your own decision-making process. I don't think we should live in this nanny state where everything is handed down to us and forced upon us. But that's why I'm going there, because it's the only place I can find that's got a basic level of normalcy, and it's just a small island with 9,000 people, and I'm hoping just to hang out there and keep making awesome content for you guys on the YouTube channel, and just focus on making even better content, and just wait this thing out. I don't want to be in the middle of this. I don't want to be in a riot. I don't want to be in looting. And, if you say that you're a diehard American and a patriot, you want to sit there and fight, I respect that. That's great, but I don't see that being a good use of your time and energy. I personally think I can have much more of an impact on people from being at a distance and focusing all my time and energy, or my mental bandwidth, on creating YouTube videos and doing these interviews with people that are a hell of a lot smarter than I am, like Hugh or Jeff Snyder, or any of the guys on Macro Voices or Real Vision that I talk to all the time, or doing whiteboard videos where I'm hopefully kind of getting you guys up to speed on how these things are working, so you can start making really good decisions, or even better decisions for yourself, your financial future, and the future of your family. That's kind of how I think I can personally help the cause of not only protecting people's purchasing power and helping them build wealth and thrive in a world of out of control central banks and big governments, but also help them hopefully increase or maximize on their personal freedom and liberty moving forward. Now, Kenneth, the testing isn't good for, well, I don't know what your question really is, but the countries, the little island countries around here, including Puerto Rico, are requiring that if you do, even if you have a negative COVID test, that the test had to have been administered within the last 72 hours. And that's the big problem, because in the States, or at least in Florida, where most of those flights are coming in from, you can't, even if you get a COVID test, you don't get the results for like 5 to 7 days, if not longer. And even if you do get it the very next day, let's say, well, then you've only got 24 hours to book the flight, do everything, because the airlines need to give that information to the country prior to you getting on the plane. So it's basically like, yeah, you're free to go. You have all this freedom, but yet in practice, you don't. You can't leave the United States. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying it's that way now, but it's very close to that way right now if you're trying to get to the Caribbean from Florida. And I don't think it's going to get better before it gets worse. That's for sure. So Rigo asks, sorry guys, this thing is tough to manage normally, this stream, but it's really hard when I've just got my finger in my iPhone. Rigo, sorry Rigo, I lost your question. It was something to the effect of, do the algos really matter in the stock market? And I think it's depending on your time frame. So if you're trading like very short term, like you're in and out in 5 minutes, then you're doing like day trading, then yeah, I think it 100% affects that. And they front run the trade. There's a lot of things that go on there to where you're going to get your butt handed to you, I think, unless you've got some sort of edge, which I don't know what type of edge you'd have. But long term, I don't think it matters. Like if you're buying Shell back in March when oil drops, or April, or whenever it dropped below or went into negative territory, and you're just holding it for 10 years, the algorithm's not really going to play into that. But if you're just trying to day trade and buy and sell things in 5-minute increments, or even shorter term than that, then yeah, I definitely think it's going to play into it. I don't think there's much of an edge there. Question, what is wrong with Marxism? How does it differ from what the Fed is doing? So what's wrong with Marxism? Well, it's, I mean, where do I start? If you value private property, freedom, liberty, then you have to be, really by definition, kind of an enemy of Marxism. The Marxists, even their own admission, they have the willingness to use force. That's the whole point. You have to let the capitalists build up society to a point where you can steal basically everything that they've bought for the good of society, or everything they've built, excuse me, for the good of society. And the whole premise of that is you have to be willing to use force. Well, if you're someone that is against the use of force, like I am, in forcing people to give you their private property, regardless of what it is, then you've got to be an enemy of Marxism. Because Marxism, you can't institute it without the use of a tops-down approach or a bottoms-up type of revolution, in which we see very clearly in the current day riots in the United States. And I'm not going to go too into it. I did a video the other day on how, and it wasn't really my idea, I want to be clear. It was something, kind of an extension of one of Jeff Snyder and Emil Kalinowski's videos they did on Marxism and how Marxists actually view capitalism. They don't see it as, oh, that capitalism, that sucks, it's bad, I hate it. And quite the contrary. Marx actually acknowledged that capitalism was a superior system to a lot of other ways of doing things. And he actually gave capitalists a lot of credit for their ability to create goods and services efficiently. But he just thought that at a certain time, capitalism or capitalists would start to feed on one another, and instead of moving society forward, would start to destroy society from within. And it was up to the Marxists to have this revolution to take everything from the capitalists before they destroyed society. And so everything that you see right now, whether it's the Fed, the wealth gap, these corporations getting the bailouts, in the Marxist eyes, that's all a result of capitalism. That's just playing out just like Marx said it would. And obviously, most people on this stream, and myself included, would say, no, that's actually a result of a lack of capitalism. when the Fed is bailing out all these corporations, that's not capitalism. That's the opposite of capitalism. That's not what we want. We don't have too little capitalism, or we don't have too much capitalism. We have too little. So that's one of the main problems with Marxism, of course, wherever it's been tried. And people, the Marxists say, well, where it's been tried, they just did it too soon. And if they would have just waited, then it would have worked out. But I don't buy that. I think whenever you try Marxism, I think it's completely counter to the way we're hardwired as human beings. Therefore, the only way to implement it, regardless of what stage we're in as far as the capitalism cycle, that it's going to lead to just massive destruction of human life. That's what we've seen in the past, and I don't see it being any different moving forward, regardless of whether or not you got the timing right as to when to steal everything from the capitalists. Whoops, I guess that's, I try to move the chat with that thumb and it goes right over the camera. So this person's been asking about Brent's theory, the dollar milkshake. What do you think about the dollar milkshake? Well, first of all, I'm a huge fan of Brent. I would consider Brent a friend. Brent's a great guy, and he's super smart. Like he really gets it. So I totally see what he is saying with how he's coming to his conclusion. I don't know if it all boils down to the transfer mechanism and the political willpower to devalue the dollar. Brent doesn't think it's there. Luke Groman does. I don't know. I'm on the fence. I mean, you guys know in my videos, one day I try to argue for the dollar crashing, and the next hyperinflation, and the next day I try to argue for the dollar going to 140 on the DXY and then crashing. So I try to give you guys the rationale behind both arguments without saying, I think it's doing this or I think it's doing that, so you guys can understand or both sides of the argument, and then you can make a better decision for yourself using your own methodology. But I think that, I don't know that Brent's right or wrong, but it's an extremely well thought out theory, and it's bulletproof. Now, whether it'll play out, only time will tell. So Steve was asking me if I have a second passport. I'm in the process, Steve, of getting my passport in Colombia because of I've got Sebastian, my assistant, set me up with a investor visa because I've taken so much money there. I've done so much investing that I qualify for that, and I don't know how long I have to keep it before I'm able to apply for a passport. I'm hoping it's 3 years, probably 5. But so we're in the process of doing that. And I'm also thinking about, give me 2 seconds, guys. My battery thing, this live stream really takes the juice out of my phone. Let me plug in my phone here. Okay. So I'm thinking about buying one of these Caribbean passports that are really on sale right now. Generally, the Kitts and Nevis passport is like 400 grand, and what I was reading now, it's on sale for like 200 because their tourism industry is getting hurt so bad. And honestly, if this travel nonsense gets worse, which it is, it's getting a lot worse. I think they might even drop the price even further. So if I could go in for like 100 grand or something like that, and get one of these additional passports that I could just hire a lawyer to grab for me in 6 months, I'm thinking about it. I'm seriously contemplating that. I would not mind having a U.S. passport, a Caribbean passport, and a Colombian passport at my disposal. I think that definitely a good objective, gives you a plan A, B, and C, which in today's environment, I think the more escape plans, for lack of a better term, that you have, the better. Let's see. Oh, there's a question. Chris asked, do I see Deutsche going bust in September? You can't time these things. I mean, their balance sheet is so opaque. And who knows? And I mean, everything, what happens if they get a bailout, which they most likely would? I mean, how do you define them going bust if you just a matter of them being insolvent? They probably already are. And they're just papering over it with a Fed repo bailout, or who knows what's going on. But I don't, you can't really say, oh, it's September because of this. You just can't call those things. Yeah, Tony asked if I could interview Michael Burry. I'd love to interview Michael Burry. One of the things I'm going to do when I get settled down in St. Barts is I'm going to go through a list of everyone that I really want to interview. Ron Paul, Rickards, Mike Maloney. I've reached out to those guys, but more recently, I've been doing some interviews with people who actually know them personally, and they're going to make a connection for me. So obviously, when you know someone and you make a connection, it's a lot different than when you just get some random email from some stranger named George Gammon that you don't know him from Adam. So hopefully, I'll be able to get a lot of those guys like Michael Burry, like Ron Paul, Rickards, Mike Maloney, and I'm sure there's another 100 people that I'm forgetting that everyone would love to see me interview, including me. I would love to see me interview them more than anybody. Yeah, Tyler, I just caught the beginning of the Macro Voices episode with Eric and Lynn, and I was just on my way out to grab dinner. So as soon as this live stream gets over, I'm going to listen to the rest of it. But the bottom line is, Lynn is sensational. Lynn is, I don't know how old Lynn is. Obviously, I partner with her in the Rebel Capitalist Pro deal. I've never really said, "Hey, Lynn, how old are you, by the way?" But I mean, she can't be that old. And I think she's just a future. I mean, she's already a superstar. She's already a superstar. But I think she's just going to be a giant in this macro space in years to come. I mean, she's going to be huge. She's just incredibly talented. And if you guys remember, I don't want to take claim for this or take credit for this, but I interviewed her way back when she had maybe, I don't know, 8,000 followers on Twitter, and she wasn't really doing much. I interviewed her, and in the interview, I did the introduction, and I said she's a rock star, a macro rock star, I think I called her, or a superstar. And she sure is. And she's blowing up. I mean, you see her on every single podcast. Now she's on Macro Voices. And I know Eric well. I know Eric personally. And as you guys know, Eric doesn't interview slouches. Like, he interviews the top minds in this business. And for her to get the nod on Macro Voices, I mean, that just, I think tells you where she's going. I'll bet you she's going to be one of the most popular interviews on Macro Voices, and I'm sure she'll be a consistent guest. And I mean, if I was Eric, I just talked to Eric actually the other day, but I didn't talk to him about this. But I wouldn't be surprised if he puts her in rotation as like one of the all-stars, just like Jeff Snyder, something like that. Talk about an interview that I would love to hear. And I think that's one thing that I really like to set up, and I'll bet you I'll be able to do it here, is to get an interview where I'm kind of the moderator, if you will, and I'm kind of asking the questions, but it's Lynn and Jeff Snyder at the same time going back and forth, and I'll be there just kind of playing referee, or not that we'd have a debate or anything, but I just kind of be asking the questions and moving the conversation and trying to explain things to the viewer that Lynn and Jeff are talking about. But man, I would love to see that. To see them both going back and forth, that would be, oh, that would be so cool. So cool. So hopefully we'll get that going. And I'll bet you I can do it. I'll bet you I can do it. I know them both well enough to make it happen. Vien is asking, where can you find real estate data? I actually had this question on Twitter today. It's just Google, guys. Google. It's simple. I think you guys are overthinking the way I do analysis. Like, I don't have a fancy Bloomberg terminal or any of that stuff. It's just Google. I just chart real estate or U.S. housing prices adjusted for inflation. That's it. And any of the charts that I use on the whiteboard videos or anything like that, I just get them all through Google and just doing research for a video. So Jason asked a really good question. If you can't leave the U.S., what's your next best choice? I would say something in the Southwest. I mean, obviously, I'd like to be somewhere where there's no taxes, but so like Nevada. But I wouldn't want to be in Vegas. Although I like Vegas, but just with everything that's going on, I don't think Vegas is really the place to be. I do like Utah. You know, I really like Moab as far as just from a geographical standpoint, just the geography there. Maybe that's a better way to say it. It's just gorgeous. Man, I love Moab. But once you start getting into Arizona, like up in kind of the high desert, you know, the Flagstaff area, and I'm spacing on the name, Show Low, Snowflake, and then up into Utah. Is it St. George that I'm thinking of? I'm not sure. But once you get up to those, people are extremely independent. Like they don't like the government pushing them around, and they don't like any of that stuff. So I would want to be around those types of people that were kind of like-minded. Not that that's going to do anything against a government that's in it to take away your personal liberties, but I would rather be around those types of people than in the middle of California, in the middle of Los Angeles, as an example. So that's kind of where I would look. Now, yeah, someone mentioned Puerto Rico. I was assuming it didn't include Puerto Rico. I'm getting, you guys know I'm a resident of Puerto Rico for Act 20 and 22, so that's where I'd go first and foremost. Because then you have access, especially if you have some resources, you have access to 10 different charter companies where you can charter a flight. Normally, you're able to charter a flight, but now, who knows? But if I had to stay in mainland U.S., it would be there, or maybe Miami, not Miami proper, but kind of in the outskirts somewhere in a more rural area. But so you could have access to like a harbor where you'd have a boat where you could just hop on the boat and go to anywhere that had some more freedom, any of the islands. I mean, Cuba for that matter. I mean, it sounds crazy to say that, but who knows? In the future, maybe the only place that you're going to be able to walk around without a mask is Cuba. Talk about irony, right? Who knows? Who knows? But that's where I'd start in the US. Maybe Montana, but see, Montana, you're really landlocked right there. And you're right on the border. I don't like that too much. But anyway, I think you get the kind of my thought process. Would I buy a farm in Las Palmas and stay in Medellin for the next few years to come, assuming things get worse? I don't know. I mean, I love Medellin. Nobody's a bigger fan than I am, but I don't know if I want to. Like, I left Medellin, and I left Medellin because I wanted to go somewhere that's more quote unquote normal right now. And when they had the lockdown in Medellin, they wouldn't let you travel to other cities, so you couldn't go to Cartagena. So I think if I was in Colombia, I'd want to be in Santa Marta or Cartagena, somewhere on the coast where if I wanted to bounce, I'd have the option of getting in my boat and just saying, peace, I'm out. But even if it wasn't that way, I don't know if I'd buy a farm in Las Palmas. Nah. I mean, I know you're talking going up the hill towards Rio Negro. I like that area, but yeah, maybe I would. Maybe I would. That's just like a small little farm is probably what you're talking about, where you could grow some of your own food, get a great view of the valley. Yeah, maybe that is a good idea. George, how would you best spend $100 to turn it into wealth? 50 to 100 bucks. Start a website. Easy, super easy. Start a website. Just produce content. Produce awesome content, and just keep churning it out as much as you can, as good as the content can be. It's gonna suck at the beginning. I mean, look at my content. It was horrible. It was brutal. But you just keep refining it. You keep iterating. You can't worry about people giving you a hard time. I mean, you guys probably didn't see my channel at the very beginning when I only had like 100 subscribers or 200 subscribers. But on the comments, like when I would get a comment, a lot of the comments were nice, but a lot of the comments were like, F you, loser, you suck. This editing's brutal. Stay off of YouTube. You're ruining the platform with your stupid videos. It was stuff like that. So you got to just power through that. You got to have enough self-confidence to just ignore the trolls and just water off a duck's back and just keep powering through, knowing that you keep iterating, you're going to get better until a certain point where you get picked up by the algorithm. But it's the same way with a blog. You get picked up by Google. And you don't have to have a fancy camera, or now I'm talking about a YouTube channel. You don't have to have any of that stuff. You can just do it from your phone. But I would start a blog with the 50 to 100 bucks. I'd start a YouTube channel for free. I'd start producing content on YouTube with my phone, and I would start producing blog posts that helped a specific community, which you are already a part of, and in something you have expertise in. And people say, "Oh, I'm not an expert in anything." Yeah, you are. Yes, you are. It doesn't matter if you're a dentist and that's your expertise. You could be a gardener. You could be an expert in drones and radio-controlled cars, whatever your hobby is, whatever you really like talking about. That's what I would suggest doing. And even with that much money, you can turn it into a little side hustle in 6 months. And then in a year or two, you can turn it into a legit business. And I would suggest listening to Miles Beckler, who's a guy that I've interviewed. I've got a tremendous amount of respect for this guy. He's awesome, and he gives all his content away for free. Go to his YouTube channel, check it out. You can see him start right at the beginning. He'll walk you through the whole process of starting with 50 or 100 bucks and turning it into an online business. All you got to do is you got to be willing to put in the work. You got to deal with the haters. You got to deal with the trolls. And if you're willing to do that, if you've got a level of ambition, then you're going to make it happen. It's just a matter of time. So next question here is, can wave of bankruptcies lead to credit contraction and GFC-like situation? Sure, absolutely. With the commercial banking system, now is the Fed going to get around that with your Fed app and your Freedom app and be able to make it so you can take out the equity in your house just by asking the Fed, and they've got your loan on their balance sheet, so it doesn't matter if they take a haircut on it for their balance sheet. It would for their P&L, but that's a whole other video. That's a whole other topic conversation. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But the short answer is yes, absolutely. Mobile homes are interesting, Pat. And my buddy Jason Hartman owns a couple RV. I don't know does he own an RV park or a mobile home? I was just talking to him about this the other day. I think he might. He owns one or the other. I can't remember. But yes, they can absolutely be a good business. And I would, if you can get one cheap, I would definitely consider that, especially when you look at the demographics of the United States and all the baby boomers retiring. I think that could be a really, really neat way to go. And if you could somehow get it for 30-year fixed rate debt or even 20-year fixed rate debt, I don't know if that's a product they're offering now, but that would be really spectacular to get that substantial positive cash flow if you buy right. I mean, you're looking at 10, 15% returns and just cap rates almost. And you're able to leverage that type of cap rate with a fixed rate debt to short the dollar. That's especially in this type of environment where we've got negative we've got negative real rates, but we've got zero nominal rates, Fed funds. It's compared to what it looks pretty darn good. But again, you make your money on the buy side with real estate. Just remember that. You always make your money on the buy side. As far as, Aaron, you're asking about confiscation, according to my research, and I know this is backed up by guys like Schiff and Maloney, who know a lot more about gold than I do, is the only thing that was safe from confiscation was jewelry. It doesn't really, the coins, the bullion, it was kind of all one and the same. But if you've got jewelry, then in the past, you've been safe. And that's one reason. I don't know if I've shared this on any of my live streams, but I have no problem talking about it. When I was in Fort Lauderdale, one of the things that I did is I bought one very specifically, I don't know how you'd want to, what the correct term is, but it's a collector's watch. And I did that I took the advice of someone I actually interviewed, who, after we got done doing the interview, we talked, and this is how, they are a big fan of gold, and they're a big fan of Bitcoin, but they also have an extensive watch collection, and that's their store of value, or one of them. And you guys have heard me talk about diesel trucks all the time, and I'm still a huge, huge fan of certain diesel trucks as a store of value, specifically 94 to 2002 Power Strokes, the Fords. If you can get them really good under 100,000 miles, I wouldn't mind parking 10 of those in my garage and just let them sit for 20 years. I almost guarantee you're gonna have the same amount of purchasing power in 20 years, 10 years as you do now, regardless of what happens with inflation. And as a matter of fact, I've got over $100,000 worth of Ford trucks as we speak in storage in Arizona, for that matter. But anyway, my point is that I had never really thought of that before, and this gentleman introduced me to the idea of buying some watches as a store of value. So I started with this watch that I just bought up in Florida, and I think we'll see how it works long term, but I think it'll maintain its purchasing power, which is a neat way to do it outside of gold. Now, I'm not saying that I'm stopping my 10% gold allocation. That's definitely still there. But in addition to that, if you just gotta, let's say you need to get out of Dodge, you need to get out of the States, you're in Florida, and all this crazy, you can see the walls are getting closer and closer and closer, and you're getting kind of claustrophobic, and you're like, I see everything that's going on with these lockdowns. I want no part of it. I just want to get out of the US just for a few weeks or just to see what happens. And you're not able to take your gold. Well, just throw a couple of your watches or maybe some jewelry, gold jewelry, and all of a sudden you got 100 grand. Bam, just like that. That you don't really have to report. You didn't buy it, you don't have to claim it or anything, and you got $100,000 of purchasing power just on your wrist and maybe in a watch in your bag and some jewelry you've got on. And no one's gonna, I don't think anyone would give you a hard time in customs, nothing. And so that's kind of what I'm doing as to have a little more peace of mind, having a good store of value, but a store of value that's transportable and can travel with you wherever you go and might be outside of the realm of government confiscation through executive order like we saw back in the 1930s, to your point. Taryn, it depends on how much cash you've got. Taryn's asking where should they store cash. If it's under 250 and it's just 15 months, you probably go on a bank account if it's too much of a hassle, especially if you have to have access to those reserves for any remodel or paying GCs, general contractors, something like that. If you've got over 250, I'd put it into short-term T-bills and roll it. So just as short term as you can get, so you don't really have any risk of inflation or anything like that. You're definitely going to get your principal back. So that's what I would do. Yeah, see, Steve's saying Dominica's down to 100 grand. That's not bad. And see, I think a lot of Americans kind of laugh at that or look down on like, oh, who would want a Dominica passport? It's actually pretty darn good. If you look at Dominica and St. Kitts and some of those others, even Grenada or Antigua, if you look at the visa-free travel, like how many countries they can go to visa-free, they're like 120. They're pretty darn good. You can get to the Eurozone. You can get to a lot of places and in some places you can't even get into visa-free with a U.S. passport, such as Brazil. So they're not just these rinky-dink, like getting a passport from Afghanistan or something where you can't really use it. They're legit, and for 100 grand, it could be a really good investment. So Juan asks, do I think that gold and silver will hit all-time highs in the next months, especially under a Biden presidency? You can't, oh, now the question's gone. Sorry, now I can't see the question anymore. The chat just moves so quickly, guys. I apologize. I think you're really asking the wrong question. I think as a thought experiment, it's fun to do that, but try not to invest based on if you think the price of something is just going up and so you buy it. You got to buy it because it's cheap. You got to have a strategy. What is it? Insurance? How does it play into your portfolio? There's more that goes into it. But if you're just asking that simple question as a thought experiment, I don't know that Biden has anything to do with it. And if you're talking about just it going to its nominal all-time highs, yeah, for sure. Oh, and maybe not silver. But as far as gold, I mean, you're pretty darn close. I don't know where gold was today. But yeah, I definitely think it could. I don't know the probabilities, but it's definitely a possibility for sure. I know a few people have commented on my glasses. I know I was getting really bad headaches, guys. So I went to the doctor in Colombia. They said I had an astigmatism in this eye, and that could have been contributing, or that could have contributed to the headaches I was getting. And they said because I've been doing so much work in front of the computer with this YouTube channel over the past, call it 8 months, they said that's probably the reason. So that's why I've been wearing these glasses. And just so you guys know, I mean, whenever I do like a whiteboard video, you guys see it and it's like 20 minutes, and you think, oh, well, George was just in front of the computer for maybe 20 minutes or an hour. You've got to realize that that 20-minute video takes us as a team, myself and the editors, probably 12 hours to produce that. And that doesn't include the amount of research that I have to do for the video itself. A lot of times I'll do a research for an entire day on a video before I do it, and it looks like this. That's a whiteboard video before it goes to the whiteboard. This was this might have been just step 3 the other day. I think this was just step 3 of the U.S. turning into Venezuela. Yeah, I think that's what this is. But that's what it looks like. So you think how long it takes you to do this, plus the research, then 12 hours to shoot and produce the video with all the editing. And I have obviously fantastic editors, but every time they do a rough draft of an edit, they send me the clips and I approve them. And I say, oh, change this, do this, do this. So I'm very, very hands-on with the edit and everything that you guys see in the videos, whether it's a certain arrow popping up or words that are being highlighted. I have a lot of, we'll call it creative control. or maybe creative micromanagement would be a better way of describing that. So anyway, my point is that's why I spend a lot of time in front of the computer when on the surface it might not seem like I do because the video is only 20 minutes. Okay, so we got a lot of chats popping up here, guys. It's getting, I've gone an hour, a little over. Here's a question from Miles. Okay. Why am I not going back to Colombia? Because, Miles, I'm sick and tired of wearing a face mask everywhere, honestly. And I'm not saying it's wrong. As you guys know, I was one of the very first people to start talking about the cerveza sickness and that it's not the flu, and it is something we need to really think about, And this was back when we didn't have much information. And I still do believe that it's not the flu. I think it's a bit worse. Now, I think everyone's massively overdoing it, but I still, just because of herd immunity and whatnot, I think it's a little more concerning. But that said, I still have the same approach and the same philosophy I had at the beginning. And that's that the government should give the people the information they have. They should be transparent, and they should let people and businesses make their own decisions. If you want to wear a face mask, wear a damn face mask. If you don't wear one. If you're a business and you want to require that people wear a face mask, fine. It's your business. You go nuts. And if you don't want to force people to do that, then don't do it. It's your business, for heaven's sakes. So at what point do you not own your own business, right? At what point do you not own your own, the limited sovereignty you have in your own damn home, for heaven's sakes, right? I mean, come on. So I'm done. I'm tired. I cannot live life that way. And see, you guys just know me from this YouTube channel. You don't see me outside of the YouTube channel, and hopefully you'll see more of that with the new YouTube channel that I started, which is more George Gammon, by the way. If you haven't subscribed to that, definitely check it out, because I'm doing clips of the interviews, like shorter clips, and then I'm going to be doing more vlog type stuff with real estate investing and more kind of behind the scenes. But my point, guys, is I'm someone that if I'm not working on the YouTube stuff, I mean, I'm like mountain climbing, I'm rock climbing, I'm doing whitewater rafting. I mean, I'm doing crazy stuff. I'm flying gliders, helicopters, doing aerobatics in planes. I mean, I'm doing those water jet packs. I mean, I'm constantly doing stuff that most people would consider crazy. I'm running 15 miles. I'm an adrenaline junkie, is as close to that as you could come without being one of these guys that's like doing a wingsuit. And so that's probably where I draw the line. But whether it's racing cars, I used to have a Porsche 911, and I used to take that thing out to the track and race the hell out of that thing every Friday night. Not every Friday, but many Friday nights when I lived in Phoenix before I retired. I would take my cars out to the racetrack because they had Firebird Raceway, where on Friday nights they let you really run whatever you want to on the NHRA track there. They have the Christmas light and everything. They give you your 60-foot time, your 8-mile time, your quarter-mile time. It's a proper quarter-mile drag strip. And I used to take my cars out there. I used to take my motorcycle out there. At the time, I had a Ducati 1098S, and I'd rip that thing out on the quarter mile. At that time, I had a Lamborghini that I would take out to the drag strip and just run the hell out of that thing. And that's the type of person that I'm in. So I can't handle I can't live in a cage. I can't live in a box. And so I love Medellin. I love Colombia. I definitely plan on going back. But for right now, I'm going somewhere where life is as normal as it possibly can be. And I can go to a beach if I want to. I can go to a restaurant if I want to. I can just go have a beer, have some wine, just have a party at my house if I want to. And if people want to wear masks, that's great. That's fine. I'm totally down. I mean, I'm not here to shame anyone or anything like that. And when I go into a restaurant now, I'll wear a mask. And I probably would even if, definitely I'd wear one on a plane for sure, even if it wasn't mandatory, just because, why not? What's your downside there? But you get what I'm saying, right? So everything is open in St. Barts. One thing that I'm going to do there that I haven't done before that I'm really looking forward to is kite surfing. I was going to do that learn to do that in Puerto Rico when I was there last, but didn't get the chance. So I'm going to learn to kite surf when I go down to St. Barts, and get back into jet skiing. I used to be really, really into the jet skis and the wave runners, and just water sports. Maybe do some fishing when I'm down there, and get back to a gym, for heaven's sakes. Man, it's the little things, right? I haven't been able to go to a gym in like 6 months. I mean, that sucks. That sucks. And I'm one of those people that, like, every day I have to do something physical, and if I don't, I just get I'm not in the right mindset. And so, the gyms, or the one gym that they have in St. Barts, is open. They're just doing normal stuff. They disinfect it or whatever, but anyway, you guys get it. I'm going off on a rant here that doesn't really doesn't benefit anyone, but you get it. Let me answer a couple more questions, guys, and then I'll let you guys go. So Steve is asking me if I think do I think the U.S. should do another round of helicopter money? No. I don't think they should do any helicopter money. No. Stop the helicopter money. Stop bailing out corporations. Stop destroying savers. That's a better way of asking. Do I think they should continue to destroy savers? No. I do not. So Mauricio asks, what do I think of the inflated stock prices? It's a bubble. I mean, it's a ginormous, massive, ugly bubble, or whatever Trump said before he got into office, when he was actually kind of honest. A big, ugly bubble, I think he said. Do I think that's a signal that consumer prices will rise as well soon? Mauricio, I think prices are already rising, buddy. Look at food. I mean, it's going up dramatically, and that's just what they're willing to tell us. And I think you've seen supply get crushed, and you've seen demand, because of the helicopter money, stay relatively consistent with what it was before. That means consumer prices going up. And people can be deflationist all they want, and that's fine. But usually the deflationist argument is that asset prices will deflate, and everything that you will have a debt deflation, which, okay, you can have a debt deflation, but we could see food prices and everything you buy on a day-to-day basis go up at the exact same time. People go back to the Depression, but they never point out the fact, and I don't know if this is a causal thing or if it's just a correlation. We don't want to make that mistake. So I don't want to say that this is the reason why something's been happening. But if you look at the inflation and deflation we had in the United States prior to the 1930s, what you'll see is we had bouts of inflation, and then we'd have 5% inflation, 5% deflation, 5%, and not exactly, but it looked like a heartbeat where we would have inflation, but then we'd have deflation. It'd kind of go all over the place where it kind of smoothed out. It all evened out. And that was prior to 1930. And if you look at a chart, or if you look at what inflation has done and deflation since then, it's pretty much straight inflation. Like we had just these little teeny dips, just maybe once every 30 years of deflation for like a month or two, and then it's right back to inflation. Well, what changed, right? It wasn't the central bank. I mean, we had the central bank since 1913, and we still had inflation, deflation from 1913 to 1930, although not as much deflation, but still, you didn't have this dramatic, obvious, just straight inflationary period the whole entire time. So one thing that changed is we had a transfer mechanism to get purchasing power from the government to the consumer, to the average Joe and Jane, through things such as unemployment, things such as Social Security, and we had a minimum wage. So I think that is a big deal, because prior to a minimum wage, if you had a bout of deflation, more businesses could stay in business producing as many goods and services as they were before, because they could lower wages to compensate. But think about it. If we have a floor on wages, then at a certain point, the businesses can't lower the wages to stay in business. Therefore, they go out of business. You have more businesses going out of business, which means fewer goods and services. So I'm not saying there's a causal effect, but I am saying it's very interesting that we had a transfer mechanism of purchasing power from the government to the consumer, or to the average Joe and Jane, happen in the 1930s in the form of Social Security and welfare or unemployment. And we had the minimum wage, which decreases supply extremely quickly. And when you have a recession, therefore increases, or gives a big tailwind to the rate of inflation. And since that time, we really haven't seen any bouts of deflation at all when you look at the CPI. I think there's something there. And so unless we do away with the minimum wage and the transfer payments, which we're increasing them, obviously, we're not going back, we're increasing them, if anything, I think that makes the likelihood of deflation in consumer prices, notice I said consumer prices, because it is very nuanced. I think it makes the likelihood of that much less moving forward, and the probability very, very low. Now, that's not to say that we don't have asset deflation. It's not to say that the dollar doesn't go up against the euro. It's not to say any of that. I'm just talking about the stuff that you buy on a day-to-day basis, like food. In my opinion, very, very unlikely that the price of food goes down anytime soon. All right, guys, let me give some shout outs here for everyone that stayed on to the end of the live stream. Just here on my phone, kind of ghetto style, but we're making it happen. Steve, thanks for staying on to the end. Brian, thank you. Yasser, thank you very much. Brett, Frank, Abdi, Antonio, Arthur, Luis, Atlas, Zoe, Bill, CJ, boy, Fat Jack Kizback, something like that. Hi Viz Economist, there he is. And sorry, buddy, sorry, Hi Viz Economist, I wasn't on the Rebel Capitalist deal tonight. I just don't have the internet, so I couldn't get on StreamYard. But I'm sure Gene did a fantastic job with Chris. So Mad Cow AD D Victory, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it, and hopefully next Tuesday we'll get back to the whiteboard videos if I'm settled in St Barts. It's just kind of, we're playing it by ear right now, but obviously it's a priority of mine. And stay tuned for tomorrow, where we've got an interview, Rebel Capitalist Show, with Shy Girl from Twitter. Her handle is, she's an oil expert, and I'm sure you guys, if you are on Twitter, FinTwit, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Her name is Tracy. She is at Shy Girl on Twitter, over 100,000 followers, and that is going to be tomorrow's Rebel Capitalist Show. So guys, we'll see you on the next video. Thanks for joining me tonight.